Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Greater Lowell Community Foundation's Celebrate Giving event, where we are here to show the value of community connections. My name is Christa Brown, and I'm the founder of the Free Soil Arts Collective, an arts organization based in Lowell, Massachusetts. Our mission is to amplify and strengthen the voices of artists of color. Our ties to GLCF run very deep. The Community Foundation has been our fiscal sponsor since we launched in January 2019, making it possible for us to function as a legitimate organization. When I was considering potential nonprofits to seek fiscal sponsorship from, one of the key things that stuck out about the foundation in particular was their deep ties to the community. I knew that we wouldn't just be a number, that we would have support from the foundation staff, people who lived in our community, who knew how to navigate the nonprofit landscape, and would stop at nothing to help us succeed. What began as an informal meeting over coffee at downtown's Purple Carrot with Foundation President Jay Linehan would evolve into GLCF becoming a deep community connection for the Free Soil Arts Collective. Another community connection and supporter of ours is Enterprise Bank. With that, I would like to welcome GLCF Chair Schadt, who is Executive Vice President, Chief Sales, and Community and Customer Relationship Officer at Enterprise Bank.
Thank you, Christa. And welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here this afternoon, even though it's virtual. We're very pleased to get together for Celebrate Giving. We're here to celebrate our community connections. I'd like to acknowledge both our board of directors and the staff of GLCF for all of the work that they have accomplished during these trying times while working remotely, being socially distant, but being extremely effective when it comes to addressing the needs of our community. I'd like to recognize our program committee, Glenn Mella, who's chaired it for quite some time, and Juan Carlos Rivera, who's recently taken over the chair position, for being such a tremendous resource during these times, at times meeting on a weekly basis in order to assess community needs and award much needed grants to many local nonprofits, particularly during the height of COVID in the spring and summer of earlier this year. I'm proud that GLCF is taking a leadership role in the community when it comes to racial equity and inclusion. At our annual meeting in June, we established a racial equity fund, and this is just another example of the Community Foundation responding in real time to address the needs within our community. I'd like to recognize our founders for having the foresight to establish a community foundation here in Greater Lowell. Having GLCF has allowed our region to have a coordinated and focused effort in providing relief grants, in particular during the COVID crisis. Jay will review the impact numbers, but all 20 Greater Lowell communities served by GLCF received grants during this time frame. And donors from across our footprint came together to support the GLCF Emergency Response Fund. Thank you to our sponsors. We're grateful to our donors who support the work of the foundation and from the commitment of our annual sponsors who help further our mission. In particular, thank you to our premier sponsor, Enterprise Bank. Thank you to our platinum sponsors, Nancy Donahue, Digital Credit Union, Eastern Salt, the Lowell Sun, and Trinity E.M.S. Thank you to our gold sponsor, Eastern Salt Company and S&R Corporations, and also thank you to our silver, bronze, and copper sponsors. This year, we're fortunate to have event sponsors as well. In supporting the work of the foundation in this challenging time, we very much appreciate our gold sponsor, Nancy Donahue, our silver sponsors, Wind Companies, NetScout and Trinity E.M.S, and our bronze Celebrate Giving sponsors, Mill City Environmental, Gallagher and Kavanaugh, and Daniel Donahue. Thank you to all of our other sponsors as well, and thank you to you here today who are here to support us at this event and for all that you do to support our foundation. Thanks so much. And with that, back to Christa.
Thank you so much, Chet. Next, I would like to welcome the President and CEO of the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, Jay Linehan.
Thank you, Christa, and good afternoon to everybody out there. And I just want to thank everybody for taking a little bit of time out of their very, very busy schedule to be with us today. Like Chet just did, I think it's important, and I would like to reiterate my thanks to all our sponsors and to all our donors. They are certainly our partners in philanthropy, because without them, the Greater Lowell Community Foundation doesn't exist. I also want to thank the Foundation's Board of Directors for entrusting me with the stewardship of the Greater Lowell Community Foundation. I've been here for almost 5 years now. It seems as though it was only yesterday when I started. And it's been an honor and a privilege to serve as the president of the Greater Lowell Community Foundation and to serve this great community. And I am especially proud of the service over the last year or so that we've done during these very trying times. Like everybody else, it has not been business as usual. But like everybody else, we've adapted to achieve our mission. We are here today, as noted, to celebrate giving, to celebrate philanthropy, and to promote the community connections that promote the welfare of so many in our community. But it's oftentimes when I'm talking about philanthropy and I speak to folks and I hear people say that, well, I'm not a philanthropist because I don't have the ways or the means to be a philanthropist. Well, it's simply not the case. Philanthropy is not reserved for those that are rich and for those that are famous. Everybody can and everybody should be a philanthropist. But with that said, there is a pre-qualification. You need to care. You need to care about people, and you need to care about your community. And you need to care enough to get engaged. You need to care enough to spend your time doing your homework, finding out what the needs in the community are, and aligning what you care about with what others care about, whether that be volunteering or whatever. You need to care enough to spend your talent, whatever that talent might be, whatever that skill may be, whatever the intellect that you may have that could assist a nonprofit or somebody in your neighborhood in a way that they need. And you need to care enough to spend your money. And oftentimes folks don't have lots of money, and that's okay. But whether it's dropping $1 in the poor box or opening an endowed fund at the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, every little bit counts. Every little bit matters, and every little bit makes a difference. So, what do you care about? How do you want to make a difference? If the Greater Lowell Community Foundation can assist you in any way, please let us know. We are here to help. In response to the pandemic, the first thing the foundation did, which was back pretty much at the beginning of 2020, was to unrestrict $195,000 that we had already granted to a variety of other nonprofits. And by unrestricting those funds, we let those nonprofits know they could use those in any way they needed to get through the pandemic. Needless to say, that was well received and it made a big difference. It wasn't long after that that the foundation established the Greater Lowell Community Foundation COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund. That fund was seeded by the foundation, and then we proceeded to raise $650,000 to go into that particular fund. But then what? So what do we do? What do we do with those dollars? What we do is what we've been doing for the last 5 years, and what we continue to do as we align grants is we look to the community. We look to what are the needs in the community and what's the assessment that we need. And what we found looking to do that initial assessment was that there were a variety of nonprofits that needed some assistance with just basic needs right out of the gate. And we were awarding grants in the tune of $1,000, $2,500 to multiple nonprofits because they just needed some basic needs. They needed some PPE, they needed some cleaning supplies, they needed just a little something during the beginning when this pandemic caught everybody off guard. those dollars oftentimes went out between 24 and 48 hours, as the need for the dollars and the timing of the dollars were likewise very, very important. Then the Mass COVID Emergency Fund was established. And of course, we're going to talk a bit about that later with the interview with the First Lady. But as that was established, it was again, okay, so now what? What do we do? What that fund did fundamentally, and again, we'll talk about this, is it set up a fund whereby the community foundations were the vehicle by which those funds got into the nonprofits in the communities. So we in turn worked with the Mass COVID Advisory Board in that fund to align the needs of so many nonprofits within our community and to get the dollars to them. So then again, what did we do? I mean, there was the part whereby we were interacting with the Mass COVID Fund, but the other part that occurred and took a tremendous amount of time and effort was, again, community assessment. How do we make certain that the dollars that we request from that fund are the ones that are best situated for the folks that are in our community? There was a tremendous amount of work and research that went into that. Collectively, between the Mass COVID Fund and the Greater Lowell Community Foundation Fund, there was 185 grants that were awarded to 105 different nonprofits that totaled $2.7 million plus. As Chet noted earlier, those funds covered our entire service area. That includes the city of Lowell and 19 other communities that we service. We knew going in that these funds wouldn't fix all the problems. The problems were way too vast for that. We were never under the illusion that this would fix everything. But what we did find, and was not surprised to find, that these funds provided a significant lifeline to so many to get them over the hump and to get them so that they can move to the next step. So what did I learn from the process that we went through and we continue to go through? Or maybe I should say, what did I affirm from this process? I think first, it's that any organization is only as good as the people that run it, that support it. I am so pleased to work for an amazing board. They were there every step of the way with their support, their encouragement, and their counsel. As Chet noted earlier, the program committee and a variety of other board members throughout, from the beginning of this all started till today, and as we proceed, have been engaged in a variety of different ways as to how do we deal with the myriad of different things that have come up over these past number of months. The second thing that I think was an affirmation for me, and it again came as no surprise, was that I've got an amazing staff. On the front end, as I made the note about the community assessment, I mean, I had Howard Amadon and Jennifer Arati are out there doing the research, making the phone calls, touching base with everybody throughout our entire service area, making certain that the appropriate needs were addressed and that we were fair and as we possibly could be in the allocation of these limited resources. And then on the back end, we had Janine Naco and Fatima Palermo and Sharon Kim, who took care of everything behind the scenes. Like I made note earlier, I mean, we had checks going out the door as quickly as we could. With the board's assistance, we amended a couple of our internal control protocols so that we get dollars out the door even more quickly. Because awarding a grant is one thing, getting the dollars in the hands of the people who need it is totally a different thing. And just throwing a check in the mail and having it arrive a week or so later, in some instances, was going to be insufficient. So in some instances, we cut the check, got in the car, drove over and delivered it. What did we learn as a foundation? And not only as a foundation, but a community through this whole process. I think one of the things that was a discussion I've had with a number of the nonprofits, and we saw this here too, is how close to the margin so many people were. I mean, this pandemic that rolled into town was a little greater certainly than a bump, but it sent everybody sideways very, very quickly. And what we saw as the grants went out the door, the greatest need was food insecurity. And as you think about that, not having food on the table, it's as basic as it gets. that to me was probably the greatest impact and surprise of all of this. Basic needs were not being met. We also recognized how small dollars made a big impact and how a community can come together to lift up those in needs, and how gracious and kind humanity can be. So what's next? I mean, I mentioned a moment ago that I've been here for almost 5 years ago. I mean, I think back to February, and I think that seems like a world away at this point in time, how much has transpired during that period of time. But we're not done. So what's next? We're talking about a flu season that's coming at us. We're talking about potentially another wave of the COVID-19. Article in the newspaper this morning about the evictions being lifted in a couple weeks. None of those bode well for all of what we've been through and what we need to anticipate we may well go through in this next step. The housing insecurity with the lifting of the moratorium will compound an already exacerbated homeless problem that we have. Again, basic needs will be at the forefront, where folks continually to be out of work. Food insecurity will again be a major issue that we'll look to address. And the remote learning needs that are becoming more pervasive now than they were before. Of course, when this rolled in with regard to schools, a lot of folks kind of closed up and went home, but now we're back in earnest. And the remote learning needs are creating lots of issues for lots of folks. If you can't pay rent, you can't pay food, you're not paying for your internet either. So how are you going to do remote learning? So there is much more that needs to be done. From the dollars that GLCF raised earlier, we haven't spent all of those. We put a little bit off to the side because we were anticipating what this might be. We've looked at a phase 1, a phase 2, and a phase 3. And we're pleased to say that the Department of Housing and Community Development received a $10 million appropriation for which they've engaged the community foundations across the Commonwealth again, much in the way that the Mass COVID did, to award money to the community foundations, who in turn will award dollars to nonprofits to address some of the key needs in our community. And an interesting outcome of this whole issue of the pandemic is that all the community foundations across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have come together and formed a collaborative and have raised money that we're going to use to find out how best to address some of the key needs of the nonprofits across our entire state. But we're going to need a lot more help than that. As Chet noted earlier, as we were going through all of the pandemic, although that wasn't enough, we had major racial injustices with the murder of George Floyd. The foundation then, in turn, established a Racial Equity Action Fund at our annual meeting in June. And since that time, within the program committees that we noted about earlier, we've been working throughout the summer while dealing with COVID to determine what are the next best steps with regard to racial equity and inclusion. The Greater Lowell Community Foundation Board back in September voted that the discretionary funds that we do every single year will have a focus on racial equity. The Neshoba Valley Healthcare Fund that the Greater Lowell Community Foundation does in joint effort with the North Central Community Foundation will have grants through that fund that will look to address racism as a public health crisis. Earlier, just Tuesday morning, with a partnership with Enterprise Bank, and I want to thank them so much for taking the lead, the Lowell Plan, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Nonprofit Alliance established and kicked off the Racial Equity and Inclusion Speaker Series that was extremely well received, and many, many people attended to that. And next month, at the Greater Lowell Community Foundation board meeting, we will have a seminar as we continue to learn and as we continue to better understand the challenges that the community will face and the challenges the Greater Lowell Community Foundation will face as to how do we better address and achieve racial equity and inclusion. This is not something that we do for a month or two or a year. It's an important paradigm shift that should be incorporated into everything that we do, and it will be. From the advent of the pandemic through the racial injustice and all the way up to today, I've seen all sorts of people from all walks of life that care. Many have stepped up. Over 170 have donated to help the cause. Many of the checks were small, $10, $15, $20, with notes attached. Help the children. Support the homeless. Feed the elderly. Yesterday morning, as I was opening the mail, I received a check. It represented the proceeds from a yard sale that said, quote, was done for the purpose of relieving individuals and families who have suffered from COVID-19. Reading these notes for me has been heartwarming. You see, I usually see them throughout the course of business, but not in the context that I've seen them over the last number of months. Because as I noted, I usually don't open the mail. I'm usually not the person who does that. But now, because of us typically working remote, I do that. So I see these firsthand. And it's very heartwarming, and it strengthens the conviction and the purpose of the foundation to improve the quality of life for everybody in our community, to make the community connection. At the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, we just don't facilitate philanthropy. We are philanthropy. Be a philanthropist. Thank you so much. Christa, back to you.
Thank you so much, Jay. That was very touching. Now I am pleased to announce the GLCF 2020 Business Philanthropy Partner Award. This award honors a business partner whose collaboration with the foundation has an impact on our community. This year's GLCF 2020 Business Philanthropy Partner Award goes to Trinity E.M.S. GLCF is grateful to Trinity E.M.S. Inc. for their incredible work during the COVID-19 pandemic and for their continued partnership with the Greater Lowell Community Foundation. The City of Lowell has undertaken vigorous response and preparedness efforts since the onset of the coronavirus crisis. These efforts have taken place in coordination with state agencies and local health partners, including Trinity E.M.S., which have resulted in positive developments that have enhanced the community's health infrastructure, including expanded testing. Trinity E.M.S. Inc. was started in Lowell, Massachusetts in 1991 by John Chemaly and Gary Seppi, two local professionals with over 70 years of combined EMS and healthcare experience. Since 1991, John and Gary have grown Trinity into an industry leader with over 300 employees, 80 plus vehicles, with multiple base locations throughout the Merrimack Valley and Southern New Hampshire. At the core of Trinity's work is community connection. It is my pleasure to introduce John Chemaly, co-owner and president of Trinity E.M.S.
I'd like to thank the Greater Lowell Community Foundation and Jennifer and Jay Linehan for giving this award to Trinity, the 2020 Business Philanthropy Partnership Award. And it's very important to us here at Trinity. The number one word in this award is partnership. Trinity and the Greater Lowell Community Foundation have had a partnership for the last 15 years or so, whether it be at the board level or at the development committee level, whatever it might be. But we're proud to be in partnership with Greater Lowell Community Foundation. What they do for the community, even what's happening now with the COVID situation and everybody's locked down and Zoom meetings are everywhere. But what Jay and what the Community Foundation have done in the COVID community is just give and give and give. So many people have been beneficiaries, Jay, to your generosity. And we're very, very happy to be a part of that. Not only that, but the person that you're honoring today, the governor's wife, Lauren Baker, she herself is a philanthropist. Trinity's been involved in several of her endeavors dealing with kids in the Boston area. She is just a wonderful person. I'm honored to share the stage with her and work with her and with the Greater Lowell Community Foundation to bring forward some of the partnerships that you've all put together. On behalf of my employees and on behalf of the company here at Trinity and everything we do for the community, we'd like to just say thank you for honoring us, because at the same time we honor you for what you've done, especially Jay, in the last 4 or 5 months in the terrible situation that we're in right now. You've shown your true colors, and we're absolutely proud to be a part of it. And we just want to thank you for this award.
Thank you, Trinity E.M.S, for all that you do for your community. Now I have the pleasure of introducing the GLCF 2020 Community Connector Award recipient. The GLCF 2020 Community Connector Award recipient is nominated by the community. And this year's recipient was not just nominated, she was nominated 3 times. Lavinia Farusa is the Executive Director of Dwelling House of Hope. She received her degree in business management from the University of Zimbabwe. Lavinia moved to the US in 1995. She worked with various group homes, including Greater Lowell Mental Health Care and Seven Hills, as well as nursing homes. It was here where she saw many working families in need. While working, she obtained her degree in human services from the University of Massachusetts Lowell. She worked at Lifelinks in a self-directed team for 8 years before she moved to Fidelity House Human Services, where she worked for 13 years as a managing director, assisting in hiring and training employees. Lavinia is a founding board member and is also the president of the Lowell African Cultural Association, which hosts the annual Lowell African Festival. She is certified as an intensive foster care provider and works with children through the Department of Children and Social Services.
That was very nice. I really appreciate that. And Jennifer and Jay, thank you so much for making this happen. I really, really appreciate. But first of all, I would like to give thanks to my God, who has given me strength, knowledge, understanding, and the wisdom to do all this. There wouldn't be any dwelling house of hope if it was not for my God, who I love so much. And I pray to every day, every night, every time. And I love one thing about Jay. Whenever he's sending his messages, I love him when he mentions something about God. I say, that's my man. So I would also like to thank my husband, who has been a very big support of me. You know, I'm always out of the house. He doesn't complain. He's always smiling. And he's just like, honey, I'm behind you. And I would like to thank my children, nephew, nieces, my friends, and all my supporters who have support my vision. This is great to me. And I would also like to thank somebody very important, Pastor Chip, who opened his doors and gave me a key and let me do all what he knew I was capable of doing at this place. He trusted me with everything. And he just opened the doors and said, Lavinia, here you are, you can have it. The keys. The building was still very new. It was not even renovated. We started from scratch. And he really trusted me. So I want to thank him. When the city told me about it was a property on 125 Mount Hope Street, it turned out to be, the owner was Pastor Chip. I'd known him for more than 20 years. He knew my mom, my daddy, and all my family. He's like a brother to me. He trusted me so much. And this dwelling also for food pantry, it started from my basement, serving 30 to 40 families. And now we are serving 300 to 400 families every month. I just thank God to have people like Pastor Chip in my life who are very supportive of what I do. And he just opens the doors. And I would also like to thank my spiritual father, Pastor Nejam, for being there for me. You know, he taught me a lot as well. Mostly, I would like to thank my volunteers. I don't want to mention their names, because if I mention their names, I might make a mistake and forget someone. All my volunteers who come every single day, the drivers who go to pick up the food, those who pack the shelves, I really appreciate them. Those who pack boxes, they go, we partner with Market Basket to get those banana boxes, and I appreciate all those. The ones who do the registration for our clients, I appreciate them so much. And those who come on Saturdays to make sandwiches for the homeless people, I do really, really appreciate them. I would like to thank those who have been delivering food too, because without those people, I don't think we'll be able to do anything at Dwelling House of Hope. Today, I would like to thank Greater Lowell Community Foundation for recognizing our work here at Dwelling House of Hope. Greater Lowell Community Foundation has always been there for us. They donated some commercial freezers and fridges, which is making everything happen here. We have to stock all the nutritious vegetables and meat which we get from our donors. Even in this time of pandemic, Greater Lowell Foundation has stepped up and make sure all what we needed was taken care of. Thank you again, Greater Lowell Community Foundation, for your support. And this beautiful award, and to recognize that the work we are doing in the community is recognized. I understand sometimes people ask, how come, you have never gotten an award or something like that? And I used to break and say, you know what? I don't like any recognition from men, because God always have recognized me. My recognition comes from God. But I didn't know there were people like Greater Lowell Community Foundation who have been watching what I was doing. I'm so grateful. I'm so excited. I don't even know how to thank you, because this means a lot to me. When I'm holding this, I'm just excited. And thank you, Jennifer. And thank you so much, Jay, because, by doing this, it means a lot. I really, really appreciate.
Congratulations to Lavinia. I now have the opportunity to introduce our keynote for the afternoon, the incomparable Lauren Baker. Lauren Baker currently serves as the First Lady of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, alongside her husband, Governor Charlie Baker. As First Lady, Lauren works to improve the lives of the children of Massachusetts, focusing in particular on the children served by our Department of Children and Families, through her work with the Wonder Fund, a private nonprofit that she helped launch. The Wonder Fund provides resources and opportunities to children engaged with DCF, so that they experience the moments of childhood wonder that all children deserve. Lauren is a veteran of the advertising world in New York and Boston, where she managed the development of brand campaigns for consumer products, technology companies, and nonprofit organizations. Today, Lauren focuses her time on building the Wonder Fund. She also works as a marketing communications consultant, serving independent schools with the Baker Group. Her continued passion for service and social responsibility is evident through her commitment to a number of causes. As a co-founder of the Massachusetts COVID-19 Relief Fund, Lauren helped raise over $31 million for statewide emergency humanitarian relief. Lauren actively serves on the Regional Board of Directors for the American Red Cross of Massachusetts, the Wonder Fund, Phoenix Charter Academy Foundation, and the CARE Institute. Lauren holds an undergraduate degree in English from Northwestern University and an MBA from the Kellogg Graduate School of Management. She enjoys fitness, travels, and wishes she could ski more often. Above all else, Lauren's proudest accomplishment is being the mother of 3 amazing children who are all grown up. We are thrilled to have her as this year's Celebrate Giving event and to have her interviewed by GLCF President and CEO, Jay Linehan. Take it away, Jay.
Well, thank you, Christa, and thank you, First Lady Lauren Baker, for joining us for this year's Celebrate Giving, entitled Community Connection. And as we were getting ready for this year's Celebrate Giving, with everything that had occurred, needless to say, we needed to readjust how we were thinking about what we were going to do. And with respect to this particular Celebrate Giving, it seemed appropriate to name it Community Connection, because with the advent of the pandemic in the foundation, we were looking and scurrying around our community to see what were the needs, calling up the various nonprofits that we work with all the time to go, what's going on? Who needs what? How can we help? What's going on here? And making all those community connections. And then, in addition to the dollars that we've raised and some of the resources we had put to work, along comes the Mass COVID Relief Fund, which of course you co-founded, which has been an amazing resource, not only just for the Greater Lowell Community Foundation and the folks that we serve here, but across the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So we're really, really happy to have you here to speak a little bit about that. And honored to have you here to speak a little bit about that. So we're going to run through a few questions. I'd like to get started. And if it's okay with you, may I call you Lauren?
Please do. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again. I'm thrilled to have you here. So as I mentioned, when we were coming up with Community Connection, I mean, that goes back to March, when all of a sudden everyone was going, whoa, oh my God, what's going on here? And, you know, how do we address this pandemic and what's going to happen? And so back then in March, you got together with a number of folks, and how did you create this Mass COVID Relief Fund? What was the inspiration for that, which was fabulous? But I'm really curious, and I'm sure the folks that are watching along with us, really curious to know, okay, so how did you get this off the ground?
Well, first, let me start by just thanking you all for inviting me to be with you today. It's really an honor for me that you'd ask, me to come and share this event with you. I've been so inspired by the work that you guys have done over the last several months. It's incredible, and so many people have benefited from your work and your deep roots and connections in your community. So thank you for letting me share this celebration with you. And on the COVID Relief Fund, it really began with a concern that my husband, the governor, voiced right away as this thing was getting more and more serious, and we were starting to understand what the response to the COVID-19 virus would look like. And he was initially really, really worried about people across the Commonwealth who would find themselves suddenly in need, people who might not qualify for unemployment, who might not qualify for state benefits, or who had never needed anything in that way before, especially in in food and housing insecurity. And he was also simultaneously really worried about particularly vulnerable populations like immigrants and the disabled and people who rely on critical services, who would just suddenly not have access to those things. And then at that point, we were all really trying to keep essential workers on their feet. And so all of these things together made a big worry for him. And at that point, we didn't really know what the feds were going to do, what the feds would be able to do, how much the state could do to support all of these people who were going to have some significant need. And so at that moment, you know, I joined in and said, I can't just sit at home and do nothing. I have to be in this battle somehow. And so I asked if I could get involved. And then at the same time, Joanna Jacobson, who is the co-founder of this fund with me, reached out to the governor and said, I really want to bring the power of private philanthropy to help outside Boston. The Boston Resiliency Fund had launched a couple weeks before we did, or maybe even a month before we did. And they were doing a great job, and they continue to do a great job of raising money, but they were only serving people within Boston, and the need is obviously much greater than that across the Commonwealth. So with help from the 1-8 Foundation, which is Joanna Jacobson's foundation, and a number of people at in the governor's office, we began to model this relief fund because we needed a statewide effort that was, initially we thought it was going to be a public-private partnership, but the more we dove into that, the more we realized that working with state government was going to take too long, first of all, and second of all, they were extremely distracted by everything that they had to do. So we decided 100% philanthropic effort was going to be the quickest, best route to providing assistance to people in need. So that's kind of...
And right out of the gate, you aligned a number of key players in the greater Boston area and seeded the fund, again, right from the very beginning with some $13 million. And then at that point in time, you had to make a decision as to how you were going to disperse the dollars that you've raised. Raising them is one thing, but how do you get those into the community to make sure that they're going to reach the people that you want them to reach, the population that you just made note of, those key factors that came into that. So obviously, everybody at this point knows that you use the community foundations to do that. But give me some insight as to, you know, how you arrived at community foundations. Oftentimes, we're the best kept secret in our neighborhoods, and folks don't know about us as well. So needless to say, I thought it was a very smart choice on the Mass COVID Relief Fund's part. But so what brought you to that? Well,
an important part of the modeling, the creation of this fund was, you know, we had this incredible sense of urgency because people needed the money now, and we didn't have time to start from scratch and create a nonprofit and all of that. And we got a lot of really positive feedback from the team in the governor's office who had worked with the Essex County Community Foundation on the Merrimack Valley disaster. And that community foundation had been able to work hand in hand with the state and the cities involved and step up a relief program in a matter of weeks. And my husband was like, you gotta go back and try that, and so with the help of the 1-8 Foundation, we were able to look out across the state in a very short time frame and identify community foundations whose catchment area could cover the entire state outside Boston. And so that was sort of part of the modeling. We knew that we could use the existing infrastructure of these community foundations and really take advantage of the community foundations' deep roots in their communities, their existing relationships with nonprofits and other organizations in their communities who had the relationships on the ground with the people in need. And all that existing infrastructure was really critical to getting the resources to the people who needed them in a matter of 2 weeks. So that's really how this community foundation structure came around. And I think it has, in the end, worked out just incredibly well and so much better than we ever could have expected. And we asked a lot of community foundations. We really asked all of them to step up in ways that required a lot of creativity and innovation and a lot of hard work, and working really fast on establishing, building relationships, deploying the funds, reporting, all of that. And it's just been really, really an incredible adventure. Probably for you too.
Well, it's certain. Well, you're right. It was an awful lot of work, but it was a great partnership. I mean, on the one side, yeah, we were, doing as best as we possibly could to respond to the requirements of the fund. And on the other side, you folks were meeting every single week, going through the different requests that the community foundations were submitting to you based upon the criteria that you gave to the community foundations. And in that, that's a question that leads me to a question with the pandemic. And you alluded to it a moment ago when you talked about some of the key priorities that your husband made reference to, but you defined the parameters of what you would fund. And they were fairly significant, but of course it excluded things too. You couldn't include everything. So what was the discussions like when you built those parameters? And the parameters, again, were fairly significant. I mean, you talked about frontline workers and, displaced housing and immigrants and food insecurity, people with disabilities and things of that nature, which were significant categories, but there were categories well beyond that the fund didn't include. So how did you determine that those were the priorities?
In every philanthropic effort, you want to say yes to everybody. You never want to turn your back on anyone in need. But we knew that this wasn't going to be a silver bullet. This was, resources as great as they were limited. And so we had to focus, and we tried to focus on what in March we thought were going to be the biggest areas of need that were not already served by state government necessarily, or the feds, or other significant funders. So, I mean, I think it really began with the governor's initial concern for food and housing insecurity, which we could see coming. And then we wanted to provide some flexibility in terms of the populations. We identified, what we thought would be populations who would have immediate significant need, but then we wanted to have a little bit of flexibility in there because we didn't know what we didn't know. So that's why, there's a tiny bit of flexibility in the term vulnerable populations, and food and housing insecurity and loss of critical services gives you a little bit of wiggle room, but you do have to focus in order to have the kind of impact that we were hoping to have.
Yeah, well, it had a significant impact for sure. And so when you started the fund, you started with $13 million. When you ended the fund, you had it up over to like $32 million. So you were not only managing the dollars that were there, you were fundraisers as you went along, and doing TV commercials and things of that nature, being on the web. So as far as asking for donations, was that something that you personally did? And is that some stuff that you had done in the past? You know, picking up the phone and calling somebody cold and saying, by the way, could you tell us a little bit about that? Because again, we went from 13 to 32. So the initial pledges that people put in were fairly significant. They got the ball rolling, but there was a lot more work that was done.
This has been an incredible journey for me. I've been raising money for, my entire adult life for nonprofits and other organizations, but never, ever at this scale. And I'm really, really proud of the work that we were able to do. I got a lot of help from, friends of mine, people that are seasoned fundraisers, and helped me and Joanna sort of coordinate our effort. But I spent all day, every day on the phone, and you pretty quickly, stop worrying about asking people for money, because you know what, I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it for all of these millions of people who have significant need. And so I got pretty brave, bold, and literally, I never worried about the fact, that we were asking for a lot of money, and our goal was $30 million. And I thought that was pretty audacious in the beginning, but I also knew that $30 million wouldn't even put a dent in the need in the end. The people of Massachusetts have proven to me time and again that they will step up and help their neighbors in need. And so I never questioned whether people would be generous. I also didn't realize how much work it would be to get to $32 million. And then again, when it's in disaster mode, there is such a thing as that. And people were really willing, large companies mostly, who were really willing to say, well, normally you'd have to fill out the application and we'd have to go to our board and we'd have to do this and that and the other thing. But you know what, just how much do you need? And we'll make it happen. And they really did. And large corporations were turning around six-figure donations in 3 days, which is just unheard of. I've just been, my heart is full. I'm so grateful to the individuals. We had over 16,000 individuals contribute online to this fund. And we had hundreds of corporations and foundations also contribute. And I'm just so grateful and so satisfied that we were able to make that happen.
Well, it certainly made a lot happen. So here we are, it's September. The fund pretty much rolled to a close in August. We're cleaning up a couple loose ends. In fact, we've got a meeting tomorrow Thursday afternoon with Jonathan Raymond, who, by the way, did a phenomenal job in administrating this whole process. So what were the key takeaways? What were the key lessons learned? Was it everything that you expected it to be? Or was it more?
It has been, yeah, I mean, it's more, I didn't know what to expect, honestly. I think nobody knows what to expect out of this, this whole pandemic. But I think there are some really important takeaways for me in this, beyond, you know, just that we could set an audacious goal and meet it and be able to really impact in a positive way, you know, 1 million people who were in need and really deserve to have the aid. I guess the biggest, you know, the lessons are the need is huge. I was surprised how many people in our Commonwealth, which is, you know, up until this point has been, you know, a real economic force, and people, we have a high quality of life here. And there are so many people in our midst, in every city and town in Massachusetts, who are in need. I was also, you know, really excited by and inspired by the incredible amount of collaboration and innovation that happened among individuals and organizations and corporations and people just making it happen. You know, there's no roadmap for this. We don't know how to make this happen, but we see this need and we're going to figure out how to make this work for people. And a lot of what I saw happening through the relief fund in terms of, you know, the collaboration of community foundations across the state, in terms of there were certain community foundations who expanded their catchment area, their service area, to learn about and serve communities that they'd never before served, who happen to just be right next door. That's incredible. And I think we've all learned a lot of lessons that we are not going to forget. We will continue to do things in different ways because they've been really effective. And probably the last piece is something as you sort of intuitively know, but for me it was, this effort has been a great example, and that is the how important a hyper-local focus is when you have significant need. And it's about taking advantage of existing relationships that between organizations and the people they serve, and using those relationships in a new way. You know, I didn't fully understand before how important trust is if you're for people in need. And you know, there are a lot of people who have a significant need for food, for example, but they're not sure that they feel comfortable going to, you know, such and such food pantry to get food because they don't know those people. That's not in their neighborhood. They're not sure. And so they would rather not get food than get it from somewhere they don't know. And so if you can say to them, you know, your church, your you know, the place where you take English as a second language, or your you know, YMCA where your children play basketball, now you can go there to get food, you can get support, whatever it is you need. That helped reach a lot of people who otherwise might not have been reached. And then it's, you know, it's just that hyper local touch really matters. And then, you know, if you think of someone who is under the stress of this pandemic, you know, they're just not going, if they're worried about, you know, the sick relative and not bringing a disease into their home and putting food on the table, and the fact that they've lost their employment, and you know, there's a lot of stress on a lot of people. That's not the person you say, well, if you just go, you know, get a computer and then go on this website and then figure out where the food pantry is closest to you and then figure out how to go there. And, you know, they're not, it's just too much, and they're not going to be able to do that. So if someone who already knows them, who, you know, they already are dealing with, can say to them, hey, you know, we're here for you. You already know us. You trust me. I'm going to bring food to your house. What can I do to help you? That makes just all the difference in the world. So the community foundations are the ones who brought this to the relief fund. You guys were the ones who said, you know, we know how to do this. We know who can do this best. And we trust these people because we've known them for years, and we work with them on other things. You know, the funds that you raise will be deployed effectively and appropriately, and that's how we're going to do it. So those lessons have been just really important to me, and you know, I'm not going to forget. I'm sure none of us will forget what we've learned during the last few months.
It has been an amazing several plus months. So, you know, one of the things that we were curious about, and to a large degree, you've touched on a lot of it already, but, you know, the role of the First Lady, and, you know, it's not really defined, and you get to define it yourself. And it seems to me you've done a heck of a job defining it over the last 6 months. But prior to that, how did you view that role? I mean, you stepped in and really stepped up on this whole thing. So thank you so much. But you know, how did you view the role as a First Lady?
Well, you know, it's a funny thing, because it might not surprise you that Massachusetts isn't like other states. You know, the First Lady's not a thing in Massachusetts. It's not an officially recognized position or whatever you want to call it. You know, we're one of 3 states, I think, maybe 4, that don't have a governor's residence. We live in our house, and you know, I do not have any official duties. I don't have any budget or office or support or anything, which is great for me because I get to blaze my own trail. And that's pretty exciting. The flip side is, you know, even though it's not official, everybody I ever meet has a sort of a sense of what a First Lady is and does, and therefore I have been given this platform to shine a light on issues that are important to me. And I never was a public person before, so I'm learning as I go, and learning how to use this platform and find my voice and do what I can to add value to the work of the Baker-Polito administration, and you know, have an impact on people in need. And you know, my personal passion is children, so I've been really focusing my efforts on that, on helping improve the lives of the children of Massachusetts. Up until the pandemic hit, and I sort of had to put that aside and try to help everybody.
Yeah, and I've noticed that you've been engaged in the Wonder Fund for some period of time, which of course helps folks from Department of Children and Families. So thank you for that, for the work that you do there. So in addition to my questions, of course, we've solicited a few questions from our community. And Karen wants to know, everybody needs someone to look up to. So who is your hero?
I have a lot of heroes, and I guess the first person that comes to mind is my mother, and, actually my parents, because they were the first people in their families to go to college, and they graduated college and worked really hard and drove really hard to achieve success and to show my brother and me how, sort of how service is important. You have to work really hard to achieve your goals, but as you do so, you must also remember where you came from and remember to give back. And service has always been a big part of my upbringing, and it's always been important to my parents, and it's really what drives me now as an adult.
So another question from our community, and thank you for that, is, as you might have suspected, we have to ask a question about your husband. You're the governor, of course. And as we're leading up to this, as we were looking at a number of the things that you do, we went back and we actually looked and saw the inaugural ball from a while ago. And there was a beautiful video of you and your husband dancing together. And it inspired the question from Jennifer is, how did you meet your husband?
Charlie and I met in business school at the Kellogg School at Northwestern in Illinois. And we were in the same section, which was at the business school, it was all the humanities people. They put them in one group because we might have needed a little extra help in the math area. But I spotted him on the first day, and I just knew that he was the one for me. So it took me a while to convince him that I was right, that we were meant to be together. But yeah, with business school, the first day, that was it for me.
So obviously, over this last 6 months, you've done quite a bit, and over your life, you've done quite a number of things as well. And I think through this COVID piece, and hopefully through this interview here, you're going to inspire some folks as well. And just for the people watching who want to connect more with their community, what would you tell them? You've been very, very adept at doing that. But if someone watching right now said, yeah, I'd like to do more, how can I do more? What advice would you give them?
I think one of my favorite sayings, I guess, is begin anywhere. And that's what I would say is just start. Something moves you, a cause or an organization or a person. If it speaks to you, it resonates with you somehow, pulls at your heartstrings, and it's calling to you in some way, then reach out. And it's easy to do. And I guess I would say, begin anywhere and start there. If it speaks to you, no matter what it is, reach out to that organization or that person and say, you touched me, what you had to say really means a lot to me because of this. And how can I help? People will always respond to that. And I think then saying yes is the other thing. Don't be afraid to just say, yeah, I'll try it. Because a lot of what organizations need from their community is help with stuff that maybe at first blush you're not sure you can do. like raise money. Don't be afraid. I think just reach out and ask how you can help, and then don't be afraid to say, yeah, I'll try it. Because what's the worst that can happen? You know, someone says, no, I can't support your organization, or maybe you fail the first time you try to coach a soccer team, but you'll try again and you'll learn. And, you know, it's the doing that is really satisfying, and the result of the doing is the impact that you want to have. So,
well, thank you so
do
much.
it.
For that. Just do it. So, again, thank you so much for your hard work and dedication. It has had a huge impact on our community and communities across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I think as a result of some of the effort that the Mass COVID Fund has done vis-a-vis getting the community foundations involved, I think it might have a little something to do with an appropriation that just got signed into law for $10 million, which again is going to use community foundations to distribute that. So thank you for that. And again, thank you for being here today. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for helping us celebrate giving. And thank you for the community connections. Thank you very much.
Well, you are so welcome. But I have to throw it right back at you because, you know, thank you. Thank you for stepping up, and thank you for saying, yeah, I'll give that a try. Yes, we can make that happen. Yes, we're going to make these, we're going to build these relationships. We're going to work faster and harder and longer than we ever have before. And we're going to innovate and be creative, and we're going to help thousands and thousands of people who need our help desperately. So thank you guys. Thank you for what you did. It's inspiring. I know you're not going to stop. I know you're not going to slow down. And I'm glad to hear about the $10 million because, yeah, let's keep that going.
Absolutely.
You guys have proven that that you're incredibly capable, and I know that there are lots and lots of people around the Commonwealth paying attention to that. So I'm a huge fan. I'm in your court, and if I can ever be helpful again, I'm in.
I'll take you up on that one. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, again, hello. I hope everybody enjoyed our discussion. I certainly did. And I hope you all got a sense of the depth and the breadth of what the Mass COVID Project did and the impact it had, not only on the entire Greater Lowell community, but across the Commonwealth as well. So, and again, a sincere thank you to our friend and supporter, First Lady Lauren Baker. So at the beginning of the program, our very gracious MC, Christa, made note of the fact that she has started Free Soil, for which the Greater Lowell Community Foundation is a fiscal sponsor. I just want to say that we are absolutely thrilled to be supporting such a great endeavor where Free Soil will lift up the voices of people of color using the arts. And that is a project that is great at any time, but it's especially great at this time. So Christa, thank you so much for what you do. We're thrilled for the work that you do. And for folks that are unfamiliar with her work, figure it out because it's worth figuring out. It is great, great work that she does. This is grassroots philanthropy at its best. And we're very pleased to be partnering with you in this. And again, I want to thank you for being a great MC today. Thank you so much. You did a fabulous job, and I'm going to turn it back to you to close it out.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Jay. Having the support of GLCF obviously means so much. And I'd love to give a special thanks to all of you, our attendees, for joining us today, and to our sponsors that made this year's Celebrate Giving event possible. Feel free to share your thoughts in the chat about how much you enjoyed the event. And finally, I hope today has reminded you of the power of community connection and how together we are infinitely stronger than we could ever be on our own. I'm Christa Brown, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.